What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank, and it is insanely cold out here. Once again, I'm reminded that I do not belong here. But this video is basically African public service announcements for all of you guys who are not really paying attention to what's going to happen. Okay, listen. Them folks, like, back up from all the local and national news and all that stuff, and we got a lot of things going on in the world, right? There's a lot of things changing. The dynamics is changing, right? But there's something we must pay attention to. If we do not pay attention to this most important thing, then we're doomed. All right? Now, what's happening is Europeans, listen, this is a fact, okay? You can all look this up yourself. Anywhere on it, it's there to be seen for those who want to know. Okay. Now, I want you to think about certain topics. I'm going to throw this out because you're going to see where I'm going here. And then I'm going to attach some supporting clips talking about the very same things, okay? Europeans are having a population decline issue, okay? Italy is the canary in the coal mine, all right? Italy, I think Italy, like last year or something, or this year, they had more people die than were born. Like, believe it or not, Europe is having an existential problem with population. All right. So is white America. So is white Australian. So is all white people around the world, wherever they are, whether it's their homeland or whether they genocided and killed the people and they live there and they call it their homeland now. All of them as a group are having an existential, irreversible population decline as a group of self-proclaimed white people, okay? Now, in actuality, they're just blending back into the fold, but they, in their minds, they're disappearing, okay? So that's one thing. Number two, now that the youth, right, the generations that they're birthing, that are being born, the few Europeans that are being born, they're into multiculturalism. They're not race pure. A lot of their white women want black men. Period. They want Asian men. They want Indian men. They want men who are brown. A lot of their women want to taste other races. All right. And they're having babies. So not only are they having a population decline, but now their women, the ones that are being born, are exploring other races because they don't see it. A lot of there are white people who they don't recognize or consider themselves white. They're like, I'm a human being. If I love somebody and they're a human being, I love them, I'm gonna be with them, right? That is a problem for the greater white culture because they need to stay. Remember, their genes are not dominant, right? So genetically and biologically, it's really easy to eliminate them, right? Genetically, as a group of white people, right? Because they're not having enough babies, and the ones they are having want to go with a black guy or a Spanish guy or Indian guy or Asian guy, anything else but a white male, right? Number three, white women and white men have always had a slave-master relationship since their inception. Europe, their system of governance was always slavery, then it was serfdom, then it was capitalism. Listen, when you look at European history, all they know is slavery, serfdom, and capitalism. Capitalism is an advanced form of slavery. Serfdom is an advanced form of slavery. That's why their mode of operation is to enslave people. That's why everywhere they go, they find a way to enslave people, whether it's through a visa enslavement, how we bring Mexicans over here and Salvadorians over here in order to pick fruits and shit like that. And then we take their passports, make them pay for their plane, make them pay for their housing, make them pay for everything while paying them absolutely nothing so that they're stuck in a debt trap, right? The capitalist system keeps their citizens in a debt trap. Everything in capitalism is designed to keep us as slaves, one way or another. All right, that's just the white European way of being. That's the way they are. All right, that's just their system. Africans, we had a different system. We had a more advanced system. We had a more civilized system. Asians have, some Asians have more advanced systems, more civilized systems, right? But we're all right now under the white capitalist advanced form of slavery. All right, I'm just laying that baseline down, okay? Now, White people don't create anything. They steal everything and take credit for it, right? So their whole history, all they did was steal everything. All their wealth. Now, I want you guys to truly think about this. All of their wealth and accomplishments is because they stole it from somebody else. Even in America, one of our biggest accomplishments is creating a nuclear bomb. What do? We stole Germans and forced them to do it. Okay? Stealing. White people will steal from other white people. That's what they do. That is the one thing white people are not naturally racist on, is the opportunity to rape, murder, and pillage people. They will rape, murder, and pillage anybody. White, black, Asian, whatever, it don't matter. It's an equal that's the only equality they have, is they will rape, murder, and pillage anybody. All right? Straight up. That's equality for them. All right? So that way of being is not sustainable, obviously, because white people, for all their furiousness, for all their ability to destroy and lie and manipulate, if you don't have the numbers, you don't have the power. It doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank account, because this thing, there's only a few white people that got money in their bank account. Only a few. The rest of them are shit out of luck. Their white supremacy is in their heads. Only a few of them actually get to really and truly enjoy what it is to be on top, right? And so the thing is, right now, white people are afraid because Africa is rising much faster than they expected. Africa, each African country is, well, not everywhere. There's some laggers, all right, but they're rising much faster than they expected. African people are rising. African Americans, we are rising much faster than they expected, right? First we was sweeping and we was cleaning their toilets, right? Then we was watching their babies, right? We watching all their babies. Then we were doing all the administrative work because they didn't want to do that, right? Then we was doing all the lower management because they didn't want to do that. Then we was doing all the middle management because they didn't want to do that. Then we was doing all the the upper management because they didn't want to do that, right? Then we started legislating because they didn't want to do that. Now we're everywhere within the system that they created for themselves, but now we're infested in it because their capitalistic laws and rules allows us to get up in there. Even though they try within the system to be as, discriminatory as possible, it's just not possible to do so. Now, another thing that's important. Understand, no matter how powerful a nation is, if you don't have numbers, you don't have power. Because Western nations make their money off taxing. Keep in mind, taxation is a form of slavery. Taxation is not just something that just is. We're so used to taxes, we think it's a normal thing, right? And that's that's one thing that both Democrats and Republicans, we both agree on. We get overtaxed by these elites, and the elites don't pay taxes. Understand, rich people don't pay taxes. Only us poor peasants, slaves, serfdoms, employees pay taxes. Okay? We are slaves. What's happening is European countries in their homeland, right, base of operation, if they don't have enough babies, they don't have enough tax revenue to continue to operate the way they want to operate. Same thing in America. If they don't have enough people, then that means they don't have any taxpayers to pay the taxes the government needs to do all the things they want to do. It doesn't matter if you have a massive military if you don't have anybody to operate the equipment. It doesn't matter if you have a massive military and all this technological advancement if you can't pay the fuel to fuel these billion-dollar pieces of equipment to go fly and bomb and genocide people. If you don't have the numbers, you can't maintain operations. You can build it, but you can't run it. All right? So Western countries are pretending like they have a problem with illegal immigration, but the thing is, they are encouraging illegal immigration because they have no choice, because they need people to come in the country to pay taxes in order for the government to make revenue to continue to do the things that the elite want the government apparatus to do on behalf of the corporations who truly run the world. All right? So they pretend like they care about illegal immigration, but they never stop immigration. They'll never build a wall and stop the money from coming over, because ain't none of you Americans gonna go pick no fruit. You know that to be fact, right? But they can get somebody else to do it, and when that person do it, he gonna pick fruit, right? He gonna have a place to live. He gonna pay taxes. He gonna go to buy food for him and his family. He gonna pay sales tax, and at the end of the year, he's gonna pay more tax. They just need them here to pay taxes. So they'll keep making you believe that they have an issue. The Republicans will keep having you believe that they actually have an issue with illegal immigration, but in actuality is them who are perpetuating the conditions in these countries to make people come to America in order for them to buy and purchase things from their companies and pay taxes. That's just true. All right? They just play political theater and have you thinking that they actually care, but they don't. They need these immigrants because it's about the numbers. The more they do this, the browner white Western countries become. Now, the elite don't care because the elite don't live with the rest of them. The elite don't care about poor white people. The elite don't care about middle-class white people. The elite white people, and these are white people, they don't care about any other white people. That's all fake. That white racism in actual practice is really just for the peasants to motivate them to be afraid of everybody else so that they can fight on their behalf and keep people divided and conquered. Because that's what Europeans have always been xenophobic. They're scared of each other. They're always been afraid about, that's why they always fight in war and they just can't trust each other and they don't trust nobody. It's really easy to scare white people. As long as you keep them scared and shit, you know, it's over. Now, these white people know that Europe doesn't have a lot of resources. So not only have they had a population decline, the powers that be are bringing in all the illegal immigrants they possibly can, calling them illegal immigrants, but this is money for rich people, right? Which is disturbing and scaring the white people in their homeland that their country is being invaded by foreigners, which technically it is. But the reason why their country is being invaded by foreigners is because the government elite that keep telling them lies are fucking up other people's countries. And then after fucking it up, they make the plane tickets real cheap to bring their ass over here. All right. It's a tactic. Okay. So white people at some point are going to have to, like, one thing about white people is they're going to do what they're going to do. They're very predictable. And if we're going to be naive and think that they're not going to do this, then we deserve everything we get. There's going to come a point in time where white people are going to say, you know what, fuck it. We're going to have to do what we got to do because we got no resources. Africa has everything and we're going to take it again. You see, they did it the last time, right? Because they had an advantage. They had a gun, they had cannon, they had weapons of mass destruction that we couldn't do nothing about, right? So now, right, now that Africans have their own military-industrial complex, because guess what? Those multi-billion dollar weapons manufacturers, guess what? They go where the money is. So if African countries start to control their own resources, right, and they start to have, governments start to have real money, guess what? Raytheon and all these companies that have no loyalty to white people, they only have loyalty to green, guess where they're going to go and start selling all that high-tech equipment? What? Africa. So as soon certain African countries are going to have military capabilities that could rival any place in the West, including America. Europeans know this. Europeans also know, because of the side effect of bringing all these Africans and all these Asians to these Western countries to enjoy and suck in all this education that Europeans have been able to gather after exploiting the world for it, Africans and Asians are gathering them intellectual properties, and some of them, not all of them, are taking it back to their homelands. But either way, within the countries that these people are, they are empowering themselves. So now we got lower management, middle management, upper management, and technical know-how. We don't have everything, but we're slowly but surely grabbing it, and they know this, right? They know once Africa gets to a certain point, there's no way they're going to be able to defeat us. They can't defeat us on an equal playing field. That's evident in history. And so white people are actively going to start talking about going to war. In America, what does them old racist white people talk about all the time? War, civil war, civil war, civil war. Why do you think they keep bringing up the Civil War? Civil War was the reflection point in which white people had to stop being their true selves. Stop indulging in their true desires and true wants. That's enslaving Africans to do all the hard and technical labor that they don't want to do as a group of people. But they just want to make all the money. But those days are changing because they can't do that anymore. And they're having a hard time. And they didn't prepare any of their children for this day because they never thought that this day was going to come. They didn't say, hey, one day them black people, they're going to get their shit together and we got to learn how to deal with it. All right. But now they're trying to do that. So now you got white people trying to put the call out there. Hey, in America, they've been doing it. Civil war, civil war, civil war. Right. And on the world stage, they're starting to talk about, oh, we're going to have to go to war with these Africans. We're going to have to go to war with these Africans because they have everything we need. Europe is an icebox. Right now, Nigeria is about to feed Europe. They need it. They're about to feed Europe with oil. We continue to feed oil because they need it like a baby. If they don't get it, they're going to die. What do you think happens when an animal becomes desperate and he starts to starve? He can do anything. He's going to become a rabbit. He'll take any risk. He'll fight anything. Listen, white people are going to get to the point in this world where they like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to fight all you motherfuckers. Fuck morality. Fuck all that. We need that shit. Y'all got it. We're going to get it. Because that's their mentality. They're not going to think, let's be nice and join hands and all that. Because remember, if they did that, that means their children are going to make babies with our children. And that means their children are going to become our children in a few generations. So no matter which way they go, they're done. And they know it. So the only way they can do it is nuke the whole fucking world. And don't think white people would nuke the whole fucking world on the way out the door. African countries need to get their surface-to-air missile technology, defense, like Iron Dome. That's one thing governments really need to get on, because a European will drop a motherfucking bomb with a last fucking can of goddamn jet fuel. If it's on the last day of their existence, they will they will press every nuclear bomb and point that shit to Africa. If we dying, you dying too. That's how they roll. They are the White Walkers on the other side of the fucking wall. They did this shit before to Rome. They will do that shit again. We know they will. All right. But anyway, without further ado, I want you to pay attention to all these clips I got, because listen, Africans, as we rise, we need to get our militaries together. We need to get our tactical minds together. We got to get our political astuteness together. We got to get all our shit together. And here's the funny thing though. Here's the funny part. Even if white people were to try to fight a war of attrition, right, with us, they would lose. First of all, they can't beat us, right? Second of all, ain't enough of them. Even if we fought a war of attrition, we would literally it would take not even a tenth of our population against their entire population. And even if both sides took heavy casualties, we'd be straight. We'd be all right. Because there's so many of us. There's really nothing they can do. Resistance is futile. This baby is kids. We don't die, we multiply. Anyway, that's all I got to say. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach them, and I'm out.
The Arab Egyptians began to invade the Sudan. The Italians began to invade Ethiopia. The French invade Morocco and Algeria. The Spanish invade Mauritania and what is now called Sahara. The French invade what is Senegal, Mali area, while the Portuguese invaded what is part of Guinea area, while the British invades, again, what is Nigeria and Ghana, and the German invades what is Gabon, Congo, and Angola, and Namibia. But the Portuguese controls Angola, so the Germans had to run down to Namibia. In the course of all of this, when the fighting was finished and the bloody wars had been fought, the Germans was left with the short end of the stick. Notwithstanding, they had called the conference in the first place to cut Africa up between the Europeans. But now Kaiser finds himself cut out of the deal by the turn of the century, the 1900s. And he said, look, unless you give me a better piece of the land, because they hadn't discovered uranium in Namibia yet, and he didn't realize the true value of the farmland in Tanzania to the economy of Europe yet. So stuck with Tanzania and Namibia, which is mostly a desert, the Germans hit the ceiling. And when the Germans couldn't get a better deal on the African mineral resources, Germany went to war to find those resources in Europe. While the British, with the Arab Egyptians, began to invade the Sudan.
Ideology of attacking people and taking what they had, because we had everything in Africa. So a war culture had to be cultivated, and especially in places like Kemet, because that was the gateway to Africa. So the war culture was really developed there as far as African people.
Over almost 3,000 years worth of history before Africans ever lost a battle. But when presented in a public school system and among our kids, it's presented as if we were always the losers, and that our existence on the plantation in the United States is sort of the beginning of our existence.
The mentalities develop differently. Europeans are traditionally xenophobic, which means they are wary of strangers, whereas African people are xenophilic, where, you know, if you see a stranger, you would embrace them and welcome them in, which has been to our detriment in many ways.
But we have to understand how people who live in a desert are actually able to cultivate more food than anywhere else in the region. And so some of those peoples actually said that Kemet was the breadbasket of the region. So much food and agriculture was successfully produced that they could have a standing army very, very early on. To have a standing army, it means that you don't have to have everyone in the fields. You can actually produce enough that some people can be the artisans. Some people can be the philosophers and the priests. And yes, definitely some people can be an army.
The people who built Egypt came from the south and the west, southeast and the west. And so Egypt became the phenomena it was because of the perfection of ecology. The right blend of silt from the floods and the river and the time of year and the temperature. They were able to produce an abundance of crop so they can create surplus food. Whenever you can create surplus food, then people can settle down and go into craft and arts and sciences and other things. And so that made Egypt or Kemet a phenomenon.
I think European society has always been violent, and it's always been hyper-aggressive. If you look at the wars between the British and the Scots, or the British and the Irish, there was always savagery even within their own population. So as a culture, this group has just been extremely violent.
Tariq's got his ethnic group. I've got my ethnic group.
Africans are jealous of Europeans.
Jealous of you?
100%.
What is there to be jealous of?
Everything.
Like what?
What do we imagine? What we created
what
in
you
this
created?
part of the world?
No, not what you created. What you looted.
We don't have war. I mean, we have democracy.
You have war. What is going on in Ukraine and Russia?
That part doesn't belong to Europe, in my opinion.
Oh, now you want to cherry pick. Now you want to select.
I wouldn't say that they belong to the good part of Europe. East part of Europe is totally like different.
It's not Europe.
It's Europe, but no. Let's just skip that part.
Okay, I will let that slide.
But I mean, you guys are coming over here, so we obviously have something you guys don't have down there.
What do you have? Full episodes coming soon on TikTok series.
The destruction of Planned Parenthood offices, and you don't understand the wall that we're going to build on the southern border of the United States. You haven't read the book The Birth Dearth by Ben Wattenberg. Ben Wattenberg was a brilliant Jewish man who was a member of the American Enterprise Institute, and he wrote a book, the first paragraph of which says, "The main problem confronting the United States today is there aren't enough white babies being born in this country." He was an advisor to presidents of the United States. He wrote the book in 1987. He says if we don't change this and change it rapidly, white people will lose their numerical majority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now, I'm not misrepresenting this. I'm telling you almost exactly what he says. He says there are three things we can do to solve this. Number one, we could pay women to have babies, as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. Then he says, and these are his words, not mine, unfortunately, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that. He says the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants that are allowed into this country every year. Then once again, he says, unfortunately, the vast majority of those going to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that. The third thing he says, and women had better pay attention to this, 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth. Does that sound like racism to you?
Can you talk a little bit about the trauma associated with
the trauma associated with it? Yeah. One of the main traumas is it tells white people that they are superior because of the lack of melanin in their skin. And then they find out suddenly that we've got a black president. That's traumatic. That's where their trauma is. Living a lie, finding out the truth is traumatic. Finding out now, recently, that within 30 years, white people will be in the numerical minority in this country is going to be traumatic. White people are scared to death right now, particularly white males. They're scared to death that they are going to lose their power in the future. And they are. But if you want to get ready for the future, if you want to be treated well in the future, treat others well in the present. What we do in the present constructs the future. We called the Japanese, and you'll pardon me, but this is what we call them, slant-eyed little yellow.
Africa is the only reason why Western Europeans get to enjoy such a high quality of life, especially for France. They brag about being able to live well even though they don't have to work as hard as Americans, but they omit the fact that all that comfort they enjoy comes off of the back of African resources and labor. England, Portugal, Germany, Belgium, Italy, and France all made a massive scramble for Africa in the 1880s, and France by far still has their foot in their old colonial ways. And even though these African nations have declared their independence, France and a couple other countries are still exploiting them, and they have given nothing in return to these African nations. They have built very little in infrastructure and construction. They have given next to nothing compared to how much they have taken to support their ways. Out of the 8 African coups that have happened since 2020, 7 of them were from French colonies. The French do not know how to build, they do not know how to innovate, they do not know how to grow democracy in any part of the world, which is why for the past 60, 70 years, they have just had French puppets that were ruling these African countries that finally got sick of how they were being treated. China has only taken an interest in Africa for 30 or 40 years, yet they have built more industry and infrastructure than all of the other European countries combined. So of course, the African nations are going to have a much more favorable disposition towards China, since they are the ones who are actually building factories, roads, bridges, hospitals. China is actually divesting a lot of their own resources to make this possible. And you guys know how I feel about a lot of Chinese policy, but they did hit the nail on the mark when it comes to Africa. It is pretty clear that Russia's Wagner forces have had a lot to do with the coups that have taken place in Gabon, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And even though the Russians aren't trying to actually help anyone, I believe they are trying to foment chaos and destabilize a lot of positions in the West. This can be an overall good thing for Central Africa. Even though the Russians' goal is to create a lot of instability for the West, this instability can spread to a lot of other African countries, and that can actually hurt a lot of China's positions there. Make no mistake, despite what you're seeing in the media, the US will find a way to exploit whatever is happening in Africa. At first, they seemed that they were very pro taking down the Niger coup, and now they've kind of backed off and they said that they are going to respect the current government. No, a lot of these African nations don't have a favorable viewing of the United States. The US will always find a way to profit off of whatever instability is caused. If there is going to be a disruption in the energy supply, I will bet you that the US will make money selling its liquid natural gas and oil. If there is going to be widespread war, the US is going to make a lot of money selling its weapons. I would not put it past the United States interests to have their cake and eat it too. They may be happy about China building all of this infrastructure because that means the US doesn't have to. It means the US doesn't have to invest in anything to make Africa more prosperous and rich, but they can reap all of the benefits for when that actually happens. In my opinion, I think that every Western interest should be kicked out of every African country and then reintroduced as a potential trading partner among peers with equal standing, instead of these African nations having to deal with the West like guaranteed exploiters.
I think there should be another genocide, or a genocide.
You say genocide, you mean the women, the children, the kids?
Absolutely.
Why? She's holding them right there. Those two
Because they're a poison and they need to be eradicated. So my children and all the other white children have a chance in this world.
And you can genocide the other.
Yes.
Part of the phenomenon of white genocide is the prophecy, because Israel was supposed to suffer death. So we now see that in terms of a mass flood of immigration into our lands that we have nothing to control. We have no ability to control. And literally the only thing that will save our land and our people is a divine intervention, and that is exactly what God promises us in chapter 24, verse 22 of the book of Matthew.
I think I have finally changed my mind. I actually now agree with the sentiment that America is the most racist country in the world. We are. It's abundantly obvious. We are the most racist country in the world toward white people. I've never seen this much animus toward any race in my entire life. And this recent story about a hospital, Karen, really proves how disgusting we have become as a nation and how ashamed we should feel that people are not standing up for the way that white people are being treated. If you are a white person, people will defy common sense and logic and deem you guilty in any situation. This is the reason why people take out their cameras instantly. Even if black people do something to offend a white person, they will then take out their cameras and record the white person responding in the right way, in the right capacity, with the right emotion, and be like, you're a Karen. Oh my God, a white person aggressing us once again, which makes entirely no sense when you examine the facts, obviously. When you examine the homicide rate in America by race and you break it down, you realize that Black Americans are overrepresented in the category of violent crimes and in homicides.
Africa is one of the most culturally dense places in the entire world, with roots back to the beginning of human existence. There are over 2,000 active languages on the continent and many historically distinct cultures, ethnicities, religions, traditions from the Mali, Egyptians, Nubians, Maghreb, Zulu, and so much more. It is an absolutely massive landmass, with more natural resources than any other continent on the planet. But why is Africa so poor? Walter Rodney set out to discover why Africa had become so underdeveloped. Development is a naturally occurring change in social relations and how we organize our social labor. As we grow in experience, education, technology, we gradually begin to change how we relate to our production. This is the quantitative difference. As these social relations begin to change more and proliferate throughout the production process as a whole, we can begin to note a qualitative difference. For example, in Europe, the slave became the serf became the laborer as we progressed from slavery to feudalism to capitalism. And although these production processes are qualitatively different, we can see how they arise out of one another. So if development is the evolution within our productive processes, what is underdevelopment? Underdevelopment comes through the interference from an outside force in those productive processes. We live in a colonial world. Vanilla comes from this continent, but the country which produces the most of it is right over here. The largest gold mine in the world sits right about here, but the country which owns it sits right over here. This is Africa. This is the productive output of mines owned by Canada. Through colonial and imperial rule, production across the entire globe has been commanded by the Western capitalist countries. This has undermined the development of indigenous economies and led to mass ecological destruction. Not only has the wealth of the global south been siphoned to the global north, but their economies are perpetually in a state of underdevelopment so long as they serve the development of nations outside of themselves. Their productive forces were not able to develop for themselves, but were instead forcefully adjusted to suit the needs of Western capitalists. In Asia, it was often spices, tea, opioids. In Latin America, it was often agricultural produce, sugar, metals, coffee. In Africa, it was people and jewels. Walter Rodney said capitalism has proved incapable of transcending fundamental weaknesses such as underutilization of productive capacity, the persistence of a permanent sector of unemployed, and a periodic economic crisis related to the concept of a market, which is concerned with people's ability to pay rather than their need for commodities. These countries are both overexploited and underdeveloped, which causes such a need for decolonization and land back.